The stage was set under the harsh fluorescent lights of one of the most watched late-night programs in the country, where every word was rehearsed, every laugh tracked, every guest measured for market impact. But on this particular night, a 24-year-old breakout singer named Zaria Lane was the scheduled guest, a performer whose recent chart-topping single had earned her 1 million new fans and a sudden invitation to the very show that had once dismissed her as another TikTok melody. And the host Garat Schwa was known for two things: his razor-sharp sarcasm and his history of veiled mockery toward rising talent, especially those who came from non-traditional backgrounds or rose to fame without the traditional music industry machine behind them. So from the moment Zaria walked onto the soundstage, glittering in a simple but powerful black suit and locking eyes with the crowd, she felt the electricity of both opportunity and something darker brewing just beneath Garrett's signature smirk. Asterisk. Garrett opened the segment the way he always did, with charm that cut. Questions that sounded curious, but came with barbed undertones, and Zaria, prepared by her team for the usual veiled digs, responded with poise and humor. Refusing to take the bait as Garrett mocked her use of social media, questioned the authenticity of her songwriting, and implied she had ghostwriters and manufactured emotions behind her viral lyrics. But what Garrett didn't know was that Zaria had come prepared not just to survive the segment, but to turn it into a reckoning, because she had seen what Garrett had done to other young stars. How he humiliated them for ratings and branded their vulnerability as a punchline. At this time, she wasn't going to let it slide. So when Garrett leaned forward with the grin that had made and broken reputations, and asked with a half-laugh, "So Zaria, how much of your trauma is real, and how much is just marketing?" The air froze for a second, audible gasps, silence from the band. And cameras zoomed in as Zaria inhaled slowly, then looked him dead in the eye and said, "Is this the part where you pretend you care? Or are you still trying to rewrite the script that got you canceled 3 interns ago?" Asterisk. The room exploded, not with laughter, not with applause, but with stunned recognition. And Garrett blinked, visibly caught off guard, because no guest had ever acknowledged the whispers about his treatment of junior staff, his rumored meltdowns. Off camera, the leaked screenshots from last summer that had nearly cost him the show until the network quietly swept them under the rug. And before he could interrupt, Zaria continued, her voice calm but unmistakably fierce. "You know, Garrett, it's funny how your show is built on truth through comedy, but you've never once been honest about who you step on to stay relevant." And the audience began to shift, not just physically in their seats, but emotionally, because they were watching something that wasn't supposed to happen. Something raw and unscripted and undeniably real. And even the producers in the booth didn't cut the feed, maybe out of shock, maybe out of fear of making it worse, but the cameras kept rolling as Garrett tried to stammer out a defense. Asterisk. Zaria didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't throw insults. She just listed facts, moments others had whispered about in industry corners. Statements backed up by those who'd been afraid to speak publicly. And when Garrett finally tried to laugh it off, saying, "Okay, so we're roasting the host tonight," Zaria leaned back and responded, "I don't roast. I reveal there's a difference." And with that one line, the crowd burst not with mockery, but with applause, long and uncoached. Because the power dynamic had shifted so fully that even those who came expecting comedy were now watching history. And Garrett, for all his practiced improvisation, had nothing left in the tank except hollow grins and redirect attempts that Zaria swatted down one by one with quiet dignity. Asterisk. By the time the segment was meant to end, Zaria had turned the table so completely that Garrett could barely read his cue cards, fumbling for jokes that no longer landed, and pretending to smile while beads of sweat formed on his temple. And producers cut to commercial late, unsure whether to regroup or shut it all down entirely. But Zaria sat there cool and composed, like someone who had been underestimated for far too long and now knew exactly how to use a platform not just to entertain, but to expose. And after the break, Garrett returned, visibly shaken, cutting the remaining interview time short and offering an awkward well. That was intense before pivoting to a musical performance that Zaria declined instead, stating calmly, "I think the performance already happened. and walked off stage, not angrily, but with the kind of calm finality that makes headlines write themselves, asterisk, in the hours that followed. Clips of the segment flooded social media, garnering millions of views within the first night. And while Garrett's fans initially tried to defend him with classic deflection tactics, she was too sensitive. It's just jokes. He's always like that. The tide shifted quickly as former guests began to speak out, posting cryptic tweets, old emails, even behind-the-scenes footage that confirmed what Zaria had implied, and a former staffer went viral with a thread detailing her experience working on the show, echoing the sentiment that Garrett's charm was a mask worn only when cameras were rolling. And by the next morning, Garrett's name trended worldwide, not for comedy, not for commentary, but as a symbol of an outdated format collapsing under its own arrogance. Asterisk, Zaria didn't post a follow-up, didn't grant interviews or milk the attention, but she released a statement through her team that simply read, "Accountability isn't cruelty. Silence is," and that became the tagline for an entire generation of creators and performers who began demanding better treatment not only on talk shows, but across every medium where youth, talent, and trauma had been commodified for cheap laughs and fast views. And Garrett's network announced a brief hiatus for the show that quietly extended into cancellation weeks later, citing creative restructuring. But everyone knew the truth. It wasn't the structure that failed. It was the host's refusal to evolve. Asterisks, in the months that followed, Zaria's platform grew exponentially, not just in music but in activism, mentorship, and media literacy. And she launched a digital series focused on empowering young artists to navigate fame without selling their dignity, featuring guests from every walk of life who had once been dismissed, tokenized, or manipulated for content. And those conversations sparked something deeper than fame. They sparked a new culture of resistance built not on shouting down critics, but on calmly, powerfully dismantling the stage that once defined them. And when asked about that night on Garrett's show during a future press conference, Zaria simply smiled and said, "I wasn't trying to end his career. I was trying to start mine on my terms, and that, more than anything, is what turned one confrontation into a movement that changed the rules." After the storm, Zaria stirred on Garrett Shaw's show had fully erupted into a cultural moment. The media landscape struggled to recalibrate, with entertainment outlets scrambling to frame the incident as everything from a generational clash to a manufactured PR stunt. But no matter how they spun it, the truth had already sunk its teeth into public consciousness. And while some anchors tried to defend Garrett's legacy by airing nostalgic montages of his early career or soliciting lukewarm support from aging comedians, those efforts only highlighted how deeply disconnected the old guard had become from the evolving demands of audiences who now saw dignity, transparency, and mutual respect as non-negotiables. And Zaria, meanwhile, stayed mostly silent. Her restraint interpreted not as retreat, but as calculated strength, the kind that lets the world spin around you while you plant your flag in bedrock. And by the time she broke her silence on her terms, in an exclusive editorial essay published in a major magazine, she didn't gloat or gash Garrett's name into the dirt, but simply dissected the moment as a microcosm of a broken entertainment industry where charm could excuse cruelty, where producers protected abusers because ratings mattered more than respect, and where too many young voices were conditioned to smile through insult just to keep their seat at the table.